At 3:27 in the afternoon on March 13th, 2025, a semi-truck jackknifed on Interstate 40 near milepost 159.5 just outside the town of Williams, Arizona. A winter storm had moved through the area that day, and the road was covered in snow and ice. The truck came to rest sideways across both westbound lanes in a section of highway with guardrails running along either side, no shoulder to escape onto, no way around it. Within seconds, vehicles behind it started arriving at highway speed, unable to see through the storm what was waiting for them. They didn't stop in time. A second tractor-trailer jackknifed trying to avoid the first one. Passenger cars slammed into the wreckage and were pushed into, and in some cases underneath, the trailers. More trucks piled in behind them. A fire broke out somewhere in the tangle of metal and spread from vehicle to vehicle, fed by diesel fuel and momentum, burning for more than 20 hours before crews could fully put it out. By the time it was over, 22 vehicles had been destroyed. 36 people had been caught in the pileup. 16 were hospitalized. 2 did not survive. And 3 more people, still unaccounted for at the time, were about to turn this crash into something far stranger than a weather-related pileup. Interstate 40 runs 2,556 miles from Barstow, California to Wilmington, North Carolina, laid down in large part along the route of old U.S. Highway 66, itself finished across Arizona in stages through the 1930s. Today, it is one of the heaviest freight corridors in the country, carrying trucks coast to coast, day and night. For most of its length through Arizona, the interstate climbs into a stretch of high country that surprises drivers, expecting nothing but desert. A forested plateau above 6,000 feet, cutting through ponderosa pine between Flagstaff and Williams, before it eventually drops back down toward the Painted Desert near Holbrook. This is the exact segment that federal crash data consistently flags as the most dangerous stretch of interstate anywhere in the state of Arizona. What makes this piece of road so lethal isn't one single hazard. It's that the same highway swings between 2 entirely different disasters, depending on the season and the direction you're driving. Up here, in the high country around Williams and Flagstaff, elevation means winter storms can turn 70 miles of interstate into a sheet of ice in under an hour. And because the road runs through cuts with guardrails on both sides, there's often nowhere for traffic to go when something blocks the lanes ahead. Truckers who run this route regularly know it by feel. The grade steepens just enough east of Flagstaff that a loaded trailer needs to be in the right gear before the first curve arrives, and in storm season, dispatchers as far away as Albuquerque and Barstow track weather reports for this exact stretch before sending drivers through it at all. Head the other direction instead, down off the plateau and west into the Mojave Desert stretch of the very same interstate in California, and the danger flips entirely. Out there, it's dry lake beds and open desert floor, where a sudden gust of wind can lift a wall of dust thick enough to drop visibility to 0 in a matter of seconds, in triple-digit heat instead of snow and ice. Researchers who study these events have identified this general stretch of the Southwest from the Mojave through Arizona and into New Mexico as one of the deadliest dust corridors in the entire country, alongside places like the Lordsburg Playa in New Mexico, where similar pileups have killed people in near-identical circumstances. Same interstate, same number on the shield the whole way across 3 states. 2 completely different ways to die on it, and drivers rarely know which version of the road they're about to meet until it's already happening around them. The Williams pileup wasn't an isolated event, and the pattern it belongs to repeated itself almost immediately. Investigators pieced together exactly how the crash unfolded. The first jackknifed truck blocked the roadway entirely. As traffic backed up in the storm and drivers tried to slow down on the ice, a second commercial vehicle also lost control and jackknifed, striking several of the vehicles that had already stopped. Passenger cars were rear-ended with momentum they had no way to shed in time. Some of them pushed into or underneath the trailers stopped ahead of them. The fire that followed spread fast enough and burned hot enough for long enough that it would take investigators weeks just to determine with certainty who had been inside some of the vehicles when it started. 2 of the dead were identified within days: Juan Beltran Sanchez of Chino Valley, Arizona, and Evelyn Davis of Ganado, Arizona. But the fire had left behind something else entirely. 3 tourists from South Korea, Jeon Lee, 33, Tae-hee Kim, 59, and Jung-hee Kim, 54, had been driving that same stretch of Interstate 40 that afternoon, traveling from the Grand Canyon toward Las Vegas in a rented white 2024 BMW SUV. When they missed their check-ins and never arrived, their families reported them missing, and searchers began looking for 3 women who seemed to have simply vanished somewhere along the highway. For days, nobody could say for certain whether they had ever reached the crash site at all, and search teams worked the surrounding area on the assumption that they might still be found somewhere off the road, disoriented in the snow. Investigators combing the wreckage eventually confirmed that one of the burned vehicles in the pileup was a BMW SUV, matching the description of the rental. What remained of it did not offer an easy answer. On March 23rd, 10 days after the crash, searchers found additional human remains buried in the debris. The fire had burned hot enough and long enough that identifying whether these were the 3 missing women required weeks of careful forensic examination rather than a simple visual confirmation. Officials asked the public gently for patience while they worked to give 3 families in another country something more certain than a missing persons report and a burned-out rental car. Less than 24 hours after the Williams pileup on the same stretch of Interstate 40 near Holbrook, roughly 60 miles to the east, a second, unrelated weather collision killed 4 more people. 2 fatal crashes on the same highway in the same winter storm system within about a day of each other. Arizona's Department of Public Safety was still working the Williams scene when troopers were called out to the second one. And this stretch of Interstate 40 doesn't reserve its danger for winter. Travel roughly 300 miles west into the Mojave Desert section of the same interstate in California, and the hazard changes shape completely. In November 2008, a dust storm swept across the open desert floor near Barstow, with winds recorded at nearly 50 miles per hour at the local airport. Visibility on the highway collapsed almost instantly. 13 vehicles, including 7 tractor trailers, piled into each other in the blinding dust within moments of each other. 4 people died. 4 more were injured. None of it had anything to do with ice. It had everything to do with the same interstate crossing some of the most exposed, wind-scoured desert in the country, where a clear afternoon can turn opaque in less time than it takes to react. Arizona's own transportation data consistently ranks Interstate 40 as the deadliest highway in the state, averaging somewhere around 35 fatalities a year, and the segment through Coconino County, the high country around Williams and Flagstaff, keeps getting flagged as the most dangerous stretch of it. Cross into New Mexico, and the same interstate averages closer to 40 deaths annually on its own. Add the numbers from the Mojave section in California, and this single, continuous interstate accumulates a body count that most of the drivers crossing it, at 75 miles per hour with the cruise control set, have absolutely no reason to think about because on a clear day, none of it is visible. The pines around Williams look peaceful. The desert near Barstow looks empty and still. The road looks from behind a windshield like any other road in America. Today, the stretch of Interstate 40 near milepost 159.5 has been repaved and reopened the way it always is after a closure like this one. There is no marker for what happened there in March 2025, nothing warning drivers that a jackknifed truck once turned this exact spot into a fire that burned for the better part of a day. Somewhere in Chino Valley and in Ganado, Two families buried people who never should have needed to drive through a snowstorm at highway speed with nowhere to pull over. And somewhere in South Korea, three families spent weeks not knowing, in the most literal sense, whether a trip to see the Grand Canyon was the last thing that ever happened to the women they loved. The guardrails on that stretch of highway are still standing, doing exactly what they were built to do, which is keep cars on the road. Nobody designed them to account for what happens when the road itself becomes the danger, whether that danger arrives as ice in the pines or dust 200 miles out in the desert. Interstate 40 does not have a single villain. It has weather that changes faster than most drivers expect, running through country that was never uniform to begin with, on a road built in a straight line straight through the middle of it. If you've ever driven through Arizona's high country during a winter storm, or crossed the Mojave when the wind picked up, tell me about it in the comments. I'll keep digging into stretches like this one.